Hi everyone, it's your favourite Atomic Blonde here and bringing you the House of the Dragon finale. Hi everyone, it's your favourite Atomic Blonde here, bringing you my thoughts on the House of the Dragon finale that dropped today. I think dropped sort of Sunday for the States. I was a little bit nervous going into this finale after the decisions at the end of episode 9 with Rhaenys and the dragon and murdering hundreds of people and then not taking out the Greens. But I don't think there's a wholly satisfying answer in this episode, but kind of good enough that we can maintain the momentum of the finale, doesn't take us out of the finale, thankfully. And yeah, we're just really careering, towards civil war now. Great acting from, Matt as always. And I think it's Darcy who plays Rhaenyra. Yeah, just absolutely fantastic. What these two can convey in a look is just chef's kiss. And considering the the fraction of the budget this show has versus like Rings of Power, and as you know, I've not talked about it on my channel, but I've seen enough clips and enough videos to know what's been going on over there. The effects in this, the dragons are amazing. They just totally pulled it off. So let's get into it. We start at Dragonstone, and Luke's talking to his mother, Rhaenyra. Obviously, she's quite, she's pregnant. I think she looks about 7 months, 6-7 months, and they're obviously kind of oblivious to what's gone on over at with the king at King's Landing, and Luke's chatting away to his mother. And again, he's kind of reiterating that, he doesn't want to be Lord of Driftmark, and that kind of means that everybody's died. And he's just such a soft, sweet soul. You can tell he's absolutely Viserys' grandson. He's kind of got all the best qualities of Viserys, and his mother, just very, very gentle, soft soul, just wants to be happy, just wants everybody to get along, and just sort of, wants to be part of a family. Very, very sweet. And he sort of says to his mother, I'm not like you. And she's like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, well, you're perfect. And she laughs, obviously after the things that we've seen Rhaenyra get up to. And she goes, oh, I'm far from perfect. And she basically talks to him about duty and how she was like his age when she was named heir to the throne, sort of around 10, 11. And he's sort of taking all this on board, and you don't really have a choice in kind of your destiny, but kind of how you do it's important, all those kind of things. Then a knight comes into the room announcing that Rhaenys has arrived and needs to see her urgently. She sends Luke away, and Daemon comes in, and she comes in, sort of strides in, and doesn't break it to him gently. She just boom, Viserys is dead. Aegon is king. That was it. Just boom. No, breaking it to her gently. The pair of them, both Daemon and Rhaenyra, are like really taken aback and quite distraught by this. So Rhaenyra's, Daemon's first thought is that basically they've killed Viserys, they've slain Viserys to get the throne. Rhaenys explains that she was locked in, but she managed to escape using her dragon just to come and warn them. And this is really the only reference they make to this bizarre ending, that she sort of said that, she's escaped with her dragon, because Damon's like, well, how did you manage to get away? How are you not being very trusting? And she explains that the coronation was happening above the dragon pit. She managed to get a dragon escape. But basically she didn't kill the Greens because she sort of says, this isn't her war and it's not her war to start. And that's kind of her justification of letting them live. But there's no real comment around her killing hundreds of people to get out. But that was a justification of not killing the Greens, that, you know, this isn't her battle. She's not signing allegiances to either side. She's literally gone there to warn them out of duty, out of her, sort of her husband and the oath they swore to her when she was a child. Because obviously there's no love lost between them because of her son. And basically just tells them, like, get out of Dragonstone. They're coming after your children. I've done my bit. And as she goes to leave, poor Ramira is just absolutely distraught and goes into premature labour, or basically she sort of starts to miscarry. And obviously she's in a lot of pain. We then have a scene, obviously, where she's in premature labour. She won't accept any help from the midwives, and they're sort of begging with her to let them help. And she's like profusely bleeding, and she's just like so like distraught and wound up. She won't let them touch her, and it's quite as it was as all the births have been so far in this show. They're quite graphic, and they don't shy away from the traumas of childbirth. Yeah, she basically ends up virtually just pulling the baby out of herself, and unfortunately the baby comes out and there's no noise, there's no crying, it's stillborn. But when we kind of see the baby is deformed. It's got a deformed head and kind of has scales on it, and it looks like it's got a bit of a tail, which is all to do with obviously the Targaryen blood. And I believe, say, not having seen Game of Thrones, but people have mentioned that this happened to one of the characters in Game of Thrones, Viserys. And it's quite common with Targaryens to have stillborn children or deformed children with dragon-like attributes. So poor Rhaenyra is on the floor cradling her dead child. She's just lost her father. She's just had the throne taken from her. And Daemon comes in and just sort of sees her, you know, cradling the child, and the child's not crying. So, you know, he then leaves and he's distraught. The pair of them are distraught. We see Rhaenyra, and then it sort of cuts to Rhaenyra binding the child, getting it prepped for cremation as per their customs. While Rhaenyra was in labour, Daemon kind of formed a council and was starting to prepare, because they know the Greens are coming, what they can do to, and Daemon says, like, well, the first attack's going to be stealth, so, you know, we need to get guards up, we need to get word out to our allies, and Jace, you need to take the dragon perimeter. Jace is like, but Mother has sort of said, you know, you can't carry out any orders or do anything while she's in bed. To which Daemon kind of just sort of carries on, and Jace gets quite. So Daemon takes him out to one side and says, "Look, I'll show you what loyalty means." And he's basically outside with two of the knights, and basically says to them, like, you know, who do you swear allegiance to? Who's the true heir? And you've got a decision to make. And as he sort of says this, his sort of dragon just looms over these two knights. But he sort of says, you know, you can swear allegiance, and be truthful. You know, if you don't want to follow, it'll be a quick and painless death. If you do want to follow, cool. But if you swear allegiance and then you betray us, you will die screaming. So both the knights do swear allegiance to Daemon, and Jace sort of witnesses all of this going on. We then have the scene where the poor baby is then sort of, you know, cremated. It's, you know, we don't see the dragon set fire to it, but it's there, and, you know, it's doing its thing. And Daemon and Rhaenyra are there, as with her sons and cousins and courtiers, and obviously it's very, very somber. Then a knight arrives and sort of says, you know, I'm on your side. It's actually one of the twins from last week, who basically obviously disowned Aegon, just said, you know, what a monster this kid is. There's no way he can be king. And he's arrived with Viserys's crown. And he basically gets on one knee and swears allegiance to Rhaenyra, hands the crown to Daemon, and Daemon kind of looks down, and you just sort of see this sort of, again, this look on his face where you can just see he's remembering Viserys, or the last time he saw the crown. Obviously, he handed it to his brother as he was getting on the throne. And then he goes over and puts it on Rhaenyra's head, and sort of, again, goes on one knee and pledges allegiance to the queen. And then everybody else does, except for Rhaenys, who's sort of just standing at the back watching all this going on. We then go inside, and there's always been this massive wooden table in the Great Hall. And it's actually, and what we find out is like a map of Westeros. And they light all these candles and then put these candles under the table, and this whole map just lights up. It's absolutely stunning. Whoever built this is just like, oh, it's just such a good prop, but oh, it looks so effective. So you've got all the different, obviously, areas and different families, and they get out their little avatars and start popping them on the table. And they start basically like sort of trying to understand the lay of the land, who's supporting them, who's not supporting them. Rhaenys comes in, and Rhaenyra asks after Lord Valerian. So obviously last we heard, he was very, very ill. He had a high fever after having his throat cut and falling in the sea. And his brother was trying to get Driftmark from him. He basically sort of says, we send our prayers. We hope he gets well. Then they start talking about what's their advantages, and Daemon's basically saying, look, we've got all these dragons, and she's like, well, the Greens have got dragons as well, and he's like, yeah, but we've got 13 dragons, they've got 4, and he starts naming all these dragons, and the fact that 3 wild dragons are on Dragonstone, that have never had dragon riders. And just basically sort of setting it up that, we've got X amount, we've also got these eggs in the hatchery, and there's more dragons. So, if we play our cards right, we can win just with the dragons, basically. Then a knight comes running in to say that they've seen a boat heading their way with the green colours, with the Targaryen dragon, and this is Otto. So he arrives with some guards, and Daemon goes down to meet him with some guards. Otto says that he's basically got an offer to make Rhaenyra, and he will only speak to the princess. And then next you hear basically the dragon and Rhaenyra flies in, and sort of going back to almost I think it's the first or the second episode where Rhaenyra talked sort of Otto and Daemon down, sort of a la that. So she flies in on her dragon, gets down, walks through the men, and sort of squares up to Otto, and he basically says that the Alicent or Aegon has seen in his wisdom that he wants peace and wants to make them an offer. The offer is like completely disowning basically Rhaenyra's children, the sort of Jace and Luke and Joffrey, and the sort of true heirs, which are Daemon's children, with her will inherit Driftmark, and they can be bearer of cups and basically have a good life and be part of the court, but they'll basically saying that they'll be safe, that nothing will happen to them. Daemon's reaction to this is just basically like piss off, but quite stronger language than that. He's I think he says he'd rather see his sons fed to the dragon than carry cups and shields for beep C word. He's literally absolutely fuming. He's not hiding how he feels at all. He's not a happy bunny. Understandably, his brother's dead. He thinks he's been murdered, and his wife's throne's been taken. So he's basically just jog on. Otto hands Rhaenyra a piece of paper, which she opens, and it's the page of the book, the story book that Alicent used to read, or Rhaenyra used to read when they were children. And Rhaenyra had torn the page out, and this was like their favourite story about one of the Targaryen princesses. And Rhaenyra's just sort of looking at it, and a tear just sort of runs down her face. And the message is like, Alicent remembers, you know, how much they loved each other and when they were friends, and you know, trying to sort of spark this obviously sort of truce that they made. And Daemon's like, sod this, get Otto, let's kill him now. And then she's like, stop, you know, no. And says she will think about the offer and she will give them an answer on the morrow. And they leave. They then sort of go back into the castle. Damon's like absolutely like spitting chips at this point. He's absolutely livid, saying like, "Are you going to accept their offer? What the hell's going on? You know, your job is as queen is to, you know, shut down any you know, traitorous acts kind of thing." And she sort of says, you know, but also my job as queen is to keep peace, is to keep the realm together. Like, do I have to be on the Iron Throne to do that? Which doesn't go down too well with Daemon. And it just basically sort of shouts at her and is like, what the bloody hell are you doing? So the queen, you know, is like, you know, because he's like, well, we've got the dragons, like just bloody take them out. And she's like, well, obviously Valyrian history, so when dragons fight dragons, you know, it doesn't end well. It's like sort of mutually assured destruction, and she doesn't want to rule over ash and bone, is what she's saying. But Daemon's like, rrr. So she ends up sending everybody away so she can talk to Daemon. And she's like sort of saying, like, you know, she doesn't want to start a war. She wants to honor her promise to her father. And Daemon's like, well, they've already declared war by, you know, taking the throne. And then she talks to him about the Song of Ice and Fire and the prophecy of something dark coming from the north. It's coming to harm them, to which Daemon absolutely flips out at this point. He grabs hold of her, he starts choking her. And he's just like, you know, I had enough of this from Viserys, of all these omens and these portals and all this nonsense. You know, like, you know, he's sort of more like saying, I believe in what I can see and touch, for God's sake. You know, we're on a precipice here, and you're talking about bloody, you know, dreams and whatnot. And then she looks at him and said, like, well, Viserys never told you. She realizes, it dawns on her, you know, obviously Daemon lets her go. And it dawns on her that Viserys never told him, and she says it. And then it dawns on Daemon that he was never told, because Viserys never considered him to be an heir, because there's only the heirs that get told about this prophecy. So she's like, oh shit, Daemon's just sort of beyond being her, you know, he's already grieving, and now he's sort of kicking the nuts effectively, that his brother never ever intended for hto, no matter what he did, that he was ever going to be considered as heir. So he goes off, you know, not to do any more, cause any more havoc. We then see Lord Valerian in bed, and he's got Rhaenys asleep in the chair next to him, and he stirs and finally wakes up. You know, his fever's broke, and he starts speaking to her. He says, "Oh, I hear that we've got a new king." And she's like, yeah. And then she tells him about his brother, that in his haste to declare him dead and take over Driftmark, he obviously called out the boys as illegitimate, and as a result, Daemon took his head for the king. Obviously, Viserys is upset at this news, but he's kind of, you know, he knows you can't, you know, it's a traitorous thing to say. And he's like, the you know, the Valerian ambition always gets the better of us and ends up, you know, getting us into trouble. You know, Rhaenyra is basically saying sort of like, you know, that's great, but you know, you abandoned me, you abandoned your grandchildren. I've been on my own all this time, and I needed you, and you went off to, you know, be with the sea. And he was like, well, that's what I needed. I'd lost everything. And she's like, well, we'd lost everything, and where the frick were you? So after sort of her scolding him and then hearing about his brother, he's like, oh, you know, when I'm better, let's just walk away. Let's just take the grandchildren. Let's retire to high tide and just don't pledge our allegiance to anybody. Let's just live our lives in peace, which is kind of where Renice was. However, after, I think, you know, my interpretation is that after she's seen Rhaenyra sort of being quite, she says, like, she's the only one holding the realm together right now. She's the only one showing restraint. All the men around the table are baying for blood. They all want to start war. And Rhaenyra is actually, you know, trying to think of a peaceful solution. And I think in that, seeing Rhaenyra like that, I think Renice actually sees more of Viserys in her than she ever thought was there. I think she always very much saw Rhaenyra as more like Daemon, but actually sort of seeing her trying to honor her father's wishes, even though, again, there's no love lost between them. And again, Lord Viserys basically says, look, she poisons everything she touches, you know, Sodder. But Renice is like, but no, the boys still need our protection. You know, they're heirs to the throne, and you know, they're going to come after them. So even though, you know, she was very initially sort of not against the boys, but she knew they weren't her blood, I think that anger's dissipated over the years, and she just sees three very vulnerable boys now who have turned out to be good men, good, you know, compared to when you look at Aegon and Aemond. I think, you know, they've kind of earned the right to their protection. So the next day, Lord Valerian and Renice arrive at Dragonstone and go to see the Queen. And he basically, and she's like, oh, you know, it's you know, it's good to see him well. And he asks where Daemon is, and she's like, he's got other pressing things to take care of, you know, because she's kind of shooed him off, so, you know, let him cool off. And he asks, you know, what's the situation? Where are we? And she's explaining the map. And he's like, oh, you know, there's too few allies here for you to win the throne. And she's sort of saying, well, I hope that these three families will stand by me and blah, blah. And he's like, hope is the fool's ally. And says, like, you know, you can't hope on these things. We have to have a strategy. And he goes on to explain that he actually won in the Stepstones, which people aren't aware of, and he fortified the position this time. He's got garrisons there. So he there and then sort of pledges his allegiance, his ships and his family's allegiance to Rhaenyra. He says, you know, we own the narrow seas. We can then basically blockade those and police those, so nothing can get through to King's Landing. Basically, they can put King's Landing to siege. And this is all when, before that, it's because Rhaenyra says that if war happens, I will not strike first. So again, she's trying to find, navigate a way through. And this is the thing that obviously Rhaenys has seen. And this is the thing that makes Lord Valerian kind of go, okay, you've got my fleet. Then they basically agree to that. Obviously, messengers need to go to the families in the north and the south, to remind them of their allegiance to, or they swore allegiance to Rhaenyra. And the Jace basically suggests it should be him and his brother, because they can take the dragons. So it'd be quicker to go there rather than sending ravens. And obviously the dragons will have, you know, a bit more sway, shall we say, might help with the allegiances. To which Lord Valerian says that, you know, it's a good idea. Everybody agrees to this. Before the boys leave, Rhaenyra takes them to one side and basically makes them swear that they won't fight, they won't take any action, no matter what happens when they're there. You know, they're there to send a message, they're envoys, and then not to fight. To which both the boys sort of, well, Luke's quite, yeah, cool, I'll do my duty. He very much is like, you know, will do anything, you know, for his mother, he will do his duty. Jace agrees a bit more reluctantly, but understands it because them's the rules. And the boys leave. Then we go to Daemon, and Daemon's pressing task. So he's in the we assume the dragon caves or the dragon pit on Dragonstone, and he's walks down with a torch and he's singing in High Valyrian, and he sort of walks down and goes further down, and then he stops and puts the torch down on the floor, and you just hear the dragon. You sort of hear this grumbling and this noise, and Daemon just very calm, just carries on singing, and then the dragon just opens its mouth and just, you know, fires out its fire flames. It's just, you know, breathing fire everywhere and sort of warding him off, and he just stays dead calm and just carries on singing. And then the dragon, the head comes down. It's sort of like just looming over Daemon like this, and the mouth's open, and it's just staring at him, like staring into his eyes. And it's really, you sort of see Daemon's reflection in the dragon's eye, and then you go to like Daemon and you see the dragon's reflection in Daemon's eye. It's a very small scene, but Daemon is just steadfast and just like, as ever, no fucks given. He's just singing away, really, really calm. And this dragon belonged to the king before Viserys, I believe. I can't remember the guy's name, but this is a very old, very big dragon. So from there, we get to Luke, and he's arrived in the south to see Lord Boros. He arrives, he lands his dragon in the courtyard, and then as he goes to go in, there's like a dragon screech, and he looks over, and Aemon's dragon's there. And this, obviously this is old and it's huge. It's probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 times bigger than Luke's dragon. And he's like, oh, shit. But he's like, got a job to do. So he announces himself and he goes in, and says to like Lord Boros that he's the envoy from the Queen and he's got a message for him. And then Boros is all like, oh, well, what? Yesterday it was the king, today it's the queen. Which one is it? You know, what's she got to say? And Luke looks over and Aemon's there being smug like Aemon does. You know, come on, bring it on. And Luke hands over the message from the queen. He then has to call the maester because he can't read, which doesn't. So he just looks a bit of an idiot from the get-go. So the maester reads the note and then whispers to him. And then he's like really offended because basically all it says is that, you know, that the families do share bloods, but just reminding him of his father's oath, and she hopes she can count on his support. And he's like, is that it? At least the Greens come here offering a pledge of like marriage to one of my daughters, and, you know, offer me this, that. And she just wants to remind me, because, you know, and when he mentions marriage, Luke, bless him, is just like, well, I can't, I'm already betrothed. He's like, well, you know, and quite, you know, but basically that. So Lord Boros just sort of sends him off a bit with a flea in his ear, going, you know, well, I'll think about it and come back to you, kind of thing. And Luke's just very, okay, I will relay your message to the Queen, and goes to leave. Then Aemon, as ever, can't keep his mouth shut, and sort of just yells out, Lord Strong, to which obviously Luke turns around, and starts engaging Luke, and says he sort of still owes him a debt. And Luke's like, look, I'm not going to fight you, because he's it's a big no-no, because if they're messengers, it's sort of under a peace banner. So you shouldn't even really be carrying weapons. It's like, you know, it's not the done thing. And also, most importantly, he's promised his mother. So he's like, I'm not going to fight you. I've brought my message. I'm just going to go. And Aemon keeps going. And Aemon draws a knife and basically still saying, like, you still owe me a debt. I want one of your eyes. Chucks the knife on the floor, sort of saying, you can pick which one it is. I'm not going to blind you. And Luke's just like, no, as you would. He's like, are you mad? And starts backing away and goes to draw his sword. And then Aemon sort of comes at him. At this point, Lord Boris does shut it down because of, you know, the rules around all of this. And he's like, you know, just pack it in. You know, I will not have any. He's an envoy. He's brought his message. Let him go. I will not have blood shed under my roof. So Aemon backs off. Luke quite sensibly legs it, gets on his dragon and goes and flies off. And there's a massive rainstorm, like thunderstorm. It's absolutely lashing down. You can barely see anything. And he's flying away as quickly as he can. But lo and behold, Aemon is following him on his dragon. And obviously his dragon is 3-4 times the size. So catches him up quite quickly. They're sort of chasing him. And he's just like, you've got a debt to pay, boy, in High Valyrian. And just teasing him and tormenting him. This spooks Luke's dragon because obviously they're trying to get away. The dragon's scared, and obviously they protect their dragon riders. So the poor little dragon sort of turns and fires, you know, flames, breathes fire, that's the word, at Aemon's dragon, which obviously doesn't respond well. Luke tells off his dragon. It's like, no, you can't, you know, you answer to me, listen to me, and they fly off. And then Aemon's dragon is then pissed. And again, Aemon's trying to control his dragon, saying no, and trying to control him, but this dragon's not happy. And Luke sort of flies out of the storm and it's all clear and he looks back and he thinks he's got away. And then the Aemon's dragon just swoops in, mouth open, boom, just bites the dragon and Luke in half, basically. And you just see them tumbling. And Aemon's like screaming, like, no. And then he just looks back and he just sees the bodies falling. And the look on his face is just, oh, shit. Oh, shit, what have I done? What have I started? Because now it's war. There is absolutely no coming back from this. Aemon has killed the Queen's son. So being completely immature, being childish, thinking that you can just play around, you know, with dragons, you know, basically playing around. It's like if you play around with a gun and the gun goes off, someone's going to get hurt. It's that kind of mentality. And he's just like, I mean, actually, he looks absolutely mortified. He's like proper shit. So then we go to Dragonstone and you see Daemon walk in to sort of the war hall, the big hall, and his head's down. And Rhaenyra is standing at the top of the table with everybody around her in front of the fire. And she just sees the look on Daemon's face, is like, this isn't good. And he gets up to her and just obviously whispers to her what's happened. And her head just goes down. And you could just sort of see her, like, you could just see it in her body. She's got her back to us, but you can just see that something in her has just snapped. And she turns around and faces the camera. And oh my God, this look on her face is just a look of like thunder. Like, just like, you're all gonna fucking die. It's amazing, absolutely amazing scene. Again, the acting of this lady and Matt, that they say so much without saying any words at all. But like, this is it. You know, it's the gloves are off. She's fed up of being nice. Screw that. You killed my son. There's no mercy now. And that, my friends, is the end of season 1. It was absolutely great. And again, it's just like, oh, poor little Luke, who just wanted a quiet life, you know, just wanted to be with his family, wanted to just do right by his mother. This really soft, sensitive soul gets taken out by Aemon and his dragon. Oh. So, but like I say, that completely sets us up for the Civil War in season 2. There's no coming back from that now. And quite honestly, can't wait. I just hope we get it next year, that we're not waiting 2 years for another season. I know obviously they've given the go-ahead. They gave a go-ahead really quickly for season 2, pretty much after episode 1. I don't know whether they've started filming yet. I hope so. But yeah, overall, this season, I mean, as I say every week, I've loved this season. One questionable choice, say last episode. Hopefully, the writers will take on board what the fans said. They don't tend to these days, so who bloomin' knows? But they have absolutely played a blinder. It's just such good quality writing, amazing acting, great effects. I mean, some of the criticisms of the first few episodes, which I had, it's a little bit slow, it's a little bit, but there was so much world building to do for you to understand, introducing us normies to the world of Westeros and how all these people were and what's the dynamics, which they pretty much done in 2 episodes. So fair play to them. And then that was it. That they were off and running the whole way through. So if you've been waiting to binge watch it, go watch this. It's definitely probably the best thing on TV this year. Granted, there's probably not a lot to compare it to, all the She-Hulk and alike, and Kenobi and all the nonsense coming out of Disney. But even still, it's still a great show. I highly recommend you go check it out. Again, it's not for everybody. Fantasy's not for everybody, and that's fine. But this is just some great storytelling. So yeah, House of the Dragon done. What am I going to do on my Sunday or my Monday nights now? Yeah, I think there's everybody around. It's great having a show as well that was weekly. You've got something to look forward to talk about. You can completely see that, Netflix and the others are going to, on their big shows, I think are going to start going to weekly. They're not going to keep dropping everything in one go. Wouldn't surprise me when Stranger Things comes out that they don't change that to weekly, given it's the last season as well, sort of draw it out a bit longer. But anyway, it's worked perfectly for this show. Yeah, because it gives you enough time to digest everything that's happened, talk about it, even go back and watch it again because there's so much in these episodes. So yeah, loved it. Highly recommend it. Do go check it out. It's on HBO in the States and in Sky and Now TV over here in the UK. And you can now watch it all in one go. So that's it. That's House of the Dragon. That's it for me. I will be back soon with my nerdy weekly roundup. Take care. Bye-bye.